Hey everyone, Noir here. Let's get into today's Reddit story.
I almost choked when my sister looked at my niece and said, "One day, this house is going to be yours." Before I could even respond, my mom smiled at me like the decision had already been made, and that was the moment I realized they had been making plans for my property without me. They all thought they knew exactly how this story would end. What none of them realized was that I had already put something in motion that was about to destroy every expectation they had. I was 26 when I found a listing for a lakefront cabin about 40 minutes outside town. And honestly, calling it a cabin was being pretty generous. The roof was covered with a tarp. One side of the deck had completely caved in. The previous owner had passed away, and his kids wanted nothing to do with the place. They just wanted it gone, so they listed it for $83,000. At that point, I had been running my own electrical contracting business for 3 years. I had saved every dollar I could, and I could already picture what that property could become. I bought it outright without a penny of help from anyone. Then I spent the next 4 years using nearly every weekend, holiday, and vacation day bringing that place back to life. I put on a new roof, built a new deck, rewired the entire cabin myself, replaced all the plumbing with help from my Uncle Glenn, refinished every hardwood floor by hand, and even built a stone fire pit down by the water. By the time I finished, the property was appraised at $340,000. My name is Cole. I am 33 years old. I work as an electrician and own a small contracting company that keeps me busy enough to feel productive and tired enough to sleep well every night. I have been dating my girlfriend Brianna for the last 2 years, and without exaggeration, she is the most level-headed person I have ever met. Unfortunately, I also have a family that has spent most of my adult life acting like my lake house belongs to all of them. Let me explain. My dad walked out when I was 12 years old. One morning, he was simply gone. My mom, Janice, raised me and my older sister Mallory by herself, and she has never let either of us forget how much she sacrificed. She is not a monster. She is not the kind of person who yells, screams, or throws things around the house. In some ways, she is worse because everything she does is subtle. Every request comes wrapped in guilt and disguised as family loyalty. If she wants something, she never comes right out and asks for it. Instead, she makes you feel like saying no means you are ungrateful for everything she has done. My sister Mallory is 4 years older than I am, and she has been the golden child for as long as I can remember. She married a guy named Travis, who sells insurance and has all the personality of a damp handshake. They have 2 kids. The oldest is Kelsey. She is 14, and honestly, she is a good kid who has absolutely nothing to do with any of this. I want to make that clear. Now here is where the problem started. The moment I finished renovating the lake house, my family decided it was basically a shared family property. My mom started telling people she had helped me buy it, even though she never gave me a dime. Mallory started scheduling weekends there without asking me first. She would bring Travis and the kids for long weekends, and they always left the place a mess. My mom even gave the access code to cousins and people from church. More than once, I drove up on a Friday only to find someone else's dirty dishes sitting in my sink. About 2 years ago, I finally put an end to most of that. I changed the locks, updated the entry code, and made it clear to my mom that the house belonged to me. If anyone wanted to visit, they needed to ask me first. She cried. Mallory called me selfish. Travis sent me a long text explaining that family property should be shared generously. I ignored every bit of it and figured we had finally moved past the issue. Or at least, that was what I believed. This past Christmas, we all got together at my mom's house. It was me, Mallory, Travis, the kids, Uncle Glenn, and a few cousins. My mom hosts a big Christmas dinner every year, and skipping it usually causes more drama than simply showing up. So we went. Dinner was fine. The turkey was dry, which had pretty much become a family tradition. Uncle Glenn told the same story again about accidentally soldering a water line to a gas fitting back in 1987. The kids stayed glued to their tablets. Everything felt completely normal. Then, just as dessert was being served, Mallory stood up. She had that look people get when they have rehearsed a speech in front of the bathroom mirror 10 times. She put her arm around Kelsey, smiled, and said, "I just want to make a little announcement." Then she looked directly at me. She said, "We've all talked about it as a family, and we've decided that when the time comes, the lake house should stay in the family. Kelsey is going to grow up making memories there, and one day it will be hers." She smiled proudly at Kelsey like she had just handed her an award. I looked over at my mom. She was already nodding. She did not look surprised at all. She acted like this was something everyone had already agreed on. Then she smiled and said, "It's only right. That house should stay in the family. Cole, you've done an amazing job with it, and this way it can stay with the family for years to come." Everyone sitting around the table turned to look at me. Mallory was smiling from ear to ear. Travis had that smug little grin on his face. Even a couple of my cousins nodded along like they were watching some heartwarming family moment. I just sat there in silence, because not one person at that table knew what I already knew. About 2 months before that Christmas dinner, back in October, my Uncle Glenn called me with a strange question. He asked, "Did you add your mom to your homeowner's insurance policy?" I immediately said, "No, of course not. Why would I do that?" Glenn explained that a friend of his worked for the same insurance company and had noticed Janice's name connected to my policy. He did not know the details. He just thought it seemed odd and wanted to let me know. So the next morning, I called my insurance company. What I found out changed everything. But before I explain that, let me go back to Christmas for a moment. Everyone at the table was still looking at me, waiting for me to smile, thank them, and give the anything for family speech they had already imagined. Instead, I quietly set down my fork, pulled out my phone, and opened an app. In less than 5 minutes, every plan they had been making behind my back started falling apart. I will tell you exactly what I did. But first, you need to know what I discovered in October, because that is where the real betrayal began. The first thing I did after Uncle Glenn called was contact my insurance company. I asked them to review my homeowner's policy and check for any recent changes. The representative pulled up my account, verified my information, and then said, "Your spouse was added as a named insured back in August." I replied, "I don't have a spouse." There was a brief pause. Then she read the name. Janice Holloway, my mother. She had called the insurance company, claimed to be my wife, answered enough security questions to pass verification, and had herself added to my policy. The representative said they would investigate and suggested I contact their fraud department. After I hung up, I sat in my truck outside a job site for almost 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. Honestly, I was not angry. I was confused. Not because I thought my mom was incapable of doing something like this. I always knew she probably was. What I could not understand was why. Being listed on someone's insurance policy does not make you the owner. It does not put your name on the deed. So what was she really trying to accomplish? I never confronted her. I wanted to, but I knew better. People like my mother change their story the second they realize they have been caught. They hide evidence, twist the facts, cry, and somehow make you feel guilty instead. So I started digging instead. About a week later, I found the first clue. While sorting through paperwork, I came across a letter from a paralegal's office that had been delivered to the lake house and that I had almost thrown away. Inside was a document called Memorandum of Verbal Agreement. According to it, Janice Holloway had loaned me $40,000 in 2019 to buy the lake house, and in return, I had supposedly agreed to give her partial ownership. The document was dated, notarized, and looked convincing. There was just one problem. My mom really had loaned me $40,000 in 2019, but it had nothing to do with the lake house. I had already owned the property for 3 years. The money was for a new work truck after my old transmission failed, and I paid back every dollar over the next 18 months. I even had the canceled checks to prove it. Someone had taken a real loan, changed its purpose, and turned it into a fake legal claim against my property. The very next day, I met with a real estate attorney named Diane Mercer, who had been recommended by another contractor. After reading the document and hearing the real story, she looked at me and said, "This is not legally enforceable, but if your mother filed it in court, it could create a cloud on your title and force you to spend time and money clearing it." I asked who could have prepared something like that. Diane said it looked like the work of a paralegal, not a licensed attorney. Someone knew enough to make it look official, but not enough to make it legally valid. That night, I told Brianna everything. We sat on the couch in my apartment while I explained everything I had uncovered. That night, I told Brianna everything: the insurance policy, the fake document, the loan, all of it. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she said, "Your mom didn't do this alone. She doesn't know insurance companies, and she doesn't know any paralegals." She was right. I already had a pretty good idea who was helping her. Travis, my brother-in-law, the insurance adjuster. He would know exactly how to get someone added to an insurance policy. And his cousin, who I had met once at a barbecue, worked as a paralegal. Suddenly, everything made sense. My mom, Mallory, and Travis had been working together to build a paper trail that would make it look like my mother had a legal claim to my lake house. The insurance policy, the fake agreement, and probably more that I had not found yet. Now, back to Christmas dinner. Mallory had just announced that Kelsey would someday inherit my lake house. My mom smiled and nodded. Everyone looked at me. What they did not know was that I had known about their plan for 2 months. I pulled out my phone, opened my security app, and changed every access code to the lake house. The front door, the side door, the garage, the dock gate, everything. It took less than 5 minutes. Then I looked up and said, "Nobody is inheriting my house." The room went silent. Mallory finally said, "Cole, we talked about this." I shook my head. "No. You, Mom, and Travis talked about it. I wasn't included. And the answer is no." My mom leaned forward. "After everything I've done for you, after the money I gave you for that house, you're going to treat your family like this?" I looked at her and asked, "What money for the house?" She answered, "The $40,000. I said, "The $40,000 you loaned me in 2019 for my work truck. The loan I paid back in full by 2021? Nobody spoke. Travis shifted in his chair. Mallory looked at my mom. My mom stared down at the table. I stood up, put my hand on Brianna's shoulder, and said, "Merry Christmas, everyone." Then we left. On the drive home, Brianna finally asked, "You've known about this for 2 months?" I nodded. I needed the whole picture first. She asked, "So what now?" I smiled. Now they panic, and people make mistakes when they panic. I was right. That night, Mallory called 3 times. I ignored every call. Then she texted, "You humiliated me in front of everyone. We need to talk." A little later came another message. "Mom is crying. Are you happy?" Then my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. It was the usual performance about how ungrateful I was. Not one word about the fake document. Not one word about the insurance policy. Travis never called. He always lets Mallory do that. I ignored all of them. The day after Christmas, Brianna and I drove to the lake house. We sat on the deck with coffee and watched the ice form along the shore. It was the most peaceful Christmas I had had in years. After the holiday, I met with Diane Mercer again. I brought everything: the fake memorandum, the insurance records, the canceled checks, my bank statements, even the text messages from 2019 where my mom wrote, "This is for the truck. Pay me back when you can." Thankfully, I had never deleted them. Diane reviewed everything and said, "First, we'll do a full title search to make sure nothing has been filed against your property. Then we'll prepare a sworn affidavit documenting the real purpose of the loan and the fact that you repaid it in full." Diane continued, "Third, we contact the insurance company's fraud department and file a formal complaint." I asked, "What about the fake document?" She said, "If your mother or anyone acting for her files that document in court, it becomes fraud. Right now, it's just sitting in a drawer. The moment they try to use it, we have them." We started everything that week. The title search came back clean. Nothing had been filed against my property. Diane believed they were still building their case, planning to present everything at once when the timing felt right. The Christmas announcement had probably been the first step. Get me to agree in front of witnesses, then use the paperwork later if I changed my mind. A couple of years earlier, that plan might have worked. Not anymore. In January, I made what turned out to be one of my smartest moves. I called my mom. Not to argue, just to have a normal conversation. We talked about the holidays, her knee, and other everyday things. About 15 minutes in, I casually brought up the loan. I said, "Mom, I was going through my tax records. That $40,000 you loaned me in 2019 for the truck. I finished paying you back in March of 2021, right?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Yeah, that sounds right. March or April." Then I asked, "And that loan was only for the truck, right?" She answered, "Of course it was for the truck, Cole. What else would it have been for?" My state allows one-party consent recordings. I recorded the entire conversation. Now I had my mother admitting, in her own words, that the loan was for the truck and had been repaid. That completely contradicted the fake memorandum. I saved the recording on my phone, my laptop, and a USB drive that I gave to Uncle Glenn. He locked it in his gun safe and simply said, "Let me know when you need it." Things got even stranger in February. Mallory and Travis showed up at the lake house with a man I had never seen before. I knew because of my security cameras. The guy walked around the property with a clipboard, took measurements, and looked through the windows while Mallory waited nearby. That evening, I called her. "Hey, Mallory, I saw you stopped by the lake house today." She paused. "Oh, yeah. We were just showing a friend the property." I asked, "The guy with the clipboard?" Another pause. "He's a contractor. We were just thinking about what the house might need someday for Kelsey." I let the silence sit for a second. Then I said, "Mallory, we've already talked about this. The house isn't going to Kelsey. It's mine." She gave a fake laugh. "Cole, Mom has paperwork. I think you know that. Let's not make this adversarial." That told me everything. She knew about the fake document, and they planned to use it. I said, "Then I'd suggest you talk to a real attorney before you try anything with that paperwork." She hung up. In March, Diane sent a formal cease and desist letter directly to my mother. It explained that the so-called memorandum had no legal basis, confirmed the loan had been repaid and was for a work truck, and warned that filing the document would be treated as fraud. It also mentioned that my mother's unauthorized addition to my homeowner's insurance policy had already been reported to the insurance company's fraud division. The letter went out by certified mail. My mom signed for it on Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, I had 14 missed calls. My mom, Mallory, Travis, my mom again. Even Travis's cousin, the paralegal, called asking if I really wanted to involve lawyers in a family matter. I ignored every one of them. Then, on Thursday, Travis finally called from his own phone. For the first time in years, his voice was calm and professional. He said, "Cole, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I said, "I'm happy to sit down." "At my attorney's office?" Travis paused for a second. Then he said he'd talk to Mallory and get back to me. That Friday night, Brianna and I were at the lake house making dinner when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mallory. "Fine. We'll meet with your lawyer. But this is going to destroy Mom. I hope you know that." I handed the phone to Brianna. She read it, gave it back, and said, "She's not worried about your mom. She's worried about herself." She was right. Meanwhile, something else was happening that none of them knew about. The insurance company's fraud investigation was already underway. The investigator had pulled the recording of the August phone call when my mom added herself to my policy. They could hear her identify herself as my wife. They could hear her answer the security questions and even give my social security number, which she still remembered from doing my taxes years earlier. The investigator called me for a statement. I gave him everything. Then he asked, "Do you want to press charges?" I told him, "Not yet. I want to see how the family meeting goes first." He understood. "We'll leave the case open." At that point, everything was in place. The recorded phone call, the canceled checks, the text messages, the title search, the cease and desist letter, the insurance fraud investigation, my attorney. All they had was a fake document and the belief that they could still talk their way out of this. The meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday at Diane Mercer's office, 10 o'clock that morning. Diane asked me to arrive at 9:30 so we could review everything one last time. I showed up at 9:15. She had everything neatly organized in a binder. The fake memorandum, the canceled checks, bank statements, the 2019 text messages, the transcript of my recorded phone call with Mom, the fraud report. She had even printed screenshots from my security cameras showing Mallory, Travis, and the contractor walking around my property. Diane looked at me and said, "If they bring a competent attorney, that attorney will tell them to stop immediately. If they come alone, they'll try to turn this into an emotional conversation. Don't let them." I nodded. At 5 minutes after 10, they walked in. All three of them. My mom, Mallory, Travis, no attorney. Mom was dressed like she was going to church. Mallory looked like she was trying to fit into a law office. Travis wore a suit that did not fit him very well. They sat across the table from Diane and me. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then my mom gave me that familiar look, the soft, sympathetic expression she always used when she wanted me to remember everything she had sacrificed. Finally, she said, "Cole, sweetheart, can't we just talk about this like a family?" Diane answered before I could, calmly and professionally. "Mrs. Holloway, thank you for coming. I'm Diane Mercer, and I represent Cole regarding all matters involving his lake house. Before we discuss anything, I'd like to review the facts." She opened the binder. In August of last year, someone contacted Cole's homeowner's insurance company, falsely claimed to be his spouse, and added your name to his policy without authorization. The insurance company has since opened a fraud investigation. My mother's expression stayed the same, but I noticed her hands tighten on the table. Diane continued. In October, Cole received a document titled Memorandum of Verbal Agreement, claiming you loaned him $40,000 in 2019 to purchase the lake house. That statement is false. She placed my canceled checks and bank records on the table. These records show the loan was for a work truck and was fully repaid by March of 2021. Then she laid down printed text messages. These messages from 2019 clearly describe the loan as being for Cole's truck. Finally, she picked up another document. And this is the transcript of a recorded phone call from January in which Mrs. Holloway herself confirms those same facts. Diane continued. This transcript contains Mrs. Holloway confirming, in her own words, that the loan was for the truck and that it was fully repaid. The room went completely silent. My mom stared at the table. Mallory's confident expression faded as she looked back and forth between Mom and the evidence. Travis couldn't take his eyes off Diane's binder. After a moment, Diane spoke again. "Let me be clear. If this fabricated memorandum is ever used in a legal proceeding, it would constitute fraud. The insurance matter is already under investigation and could lead to criminal charges. Cole has handled this patiently, but we're fully prepared to pursue every legal option if necessary." Then she looked at me. That was my turn. I leaned forward and said calmly, "Mom, I know about the fake document. I know Travis's cousin helped prepare it. I know Travis showed you how to get yourself added to my insurance policy. And I know Mallory even brought a contractor to my lake house to plan renovations on property that isn't hers." Travis started to speak. I raised my hand. "I'm not finished." He stayed quiet. I looked at all three of them. "I bought that house with my own money. I rebuilt it with my own hands. None of you have any claim to it. And the fact that you created fake paperwork and committed insurance fraud to try to take it, I'm still trying to process that." I looked at my mom. This time, the tears on her face looked real. I said, "I don't want to press charges. I don't want this to end in court. But I need one thing, and it's not negotiable." Diane slid a document across the table. It stated that Janice Holloway had no ownership or legal interest in my lake house, confirmed the loan was for my work truck and had been repaid, and acknowledged that the memorandum was false and invalid. Diane said, "If Mrs. Holloway signs this today, Cole has agreed not to pursue criminal charges related to the insurance fraud or file a complaint against the paralegal who prepared the document." My mom just stared at it. Then Mallory finally spoke. "Mom, you told me there was a real agreement. You said Cole promised you part of the house." My mom said nothing. Mallory stood up and looked at Travis. "You knew this wasn't real. You both knew. And you pulled me into it." Travis quietly said, "Mallory, it's more complicated than that." She shook her head. "No, it isn't." Then she turned to me. For the first time in years, she dropped the act. "Cole, I didn't know it was fake. I believed what they told me." I believed her. She looked genuinely shocked. Finally, my mom whispered, "I just wanted to keep the family together." I looked at her and said, "No, Mom. You wanted to stay in control." She actually flinched. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Diane gently tapped the document. "Mrs. Holloway, I recommend having your own attorney review this before signing. But I also recommend not waiting too long. The insurance investigation will continue regardless of what happens here." My mom picked up the pen. Without arguing, without negotiating, without another speech about family, she signed the document. Then she set the pen down and stared at the page. Just as the room fell silent again, Diane's phone buzzed. Diane checked the message, then looked at me. "Cole, can we talk in the hallway for a minute?" We stepped outside. She showed me an email from the insurance company's fraud investigator. After reviewing everything, the company had decided to move forward on its own. They were filing their own fraud complaint against Janice Holloway. Not a criminal referral, but a civil action through their corporate legal department to recover damages, penalties, and investigation costs. Diane looked at me and said, "This is out of our hands now. The insurance company is acting independently." I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. The first domino had already fallen. The rest were starting to follow. The weeks after that meeting weren't dramatic. They were just messy. The kind of slow unraveling that happens when years of lies finally catch up with people. 3 days later, my mom called. She sounded exhausted. Cole, I got a letter from the insurance company. They say I committed fraud. I answered, You did, Mom. There was a long silence. Then she quietly said, I never thought about it that way. I replied, I know. That's part of the problem. She asked if I would call the insurance company and explain it had all been a misunderstanding. I told her I couldn't. The company was handling it on its own now, and she needed to hire a real attorney. She sighed. I can't afford one. I told her I was sorry, and I meant it. But I also knew that if I rescued her again, nothing would ever change. That evening, I called Uncle Glenn and asked if he could help her find an attorney who charged on a sliding scale. He agreed. Before hanging up, he said, Your mom called me earlier. She's scared. I answered, Good, she should be. Glenn was quiet for a second. Then he said, You're handling this the right way, kid. Your dad would have folded. You're not your dad. That hit me harder than I expected. The insurance case moved slowly. Eventually, my mom's lawyer negotiated a settlement. She had to repay the insurance premiums, cover the investigation costs, and pay a penalty. It came to a little over $7,000. Painful, but not devastating. She paid it off over 6 months. I only knew because Uncle Glenn mentioned it. Mallory and I didn't speak for almost 2 months. Then one Sunday night, she called. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. She said, I need you to just listen. I told her I would. She took a deep breath. Travis and I are in a bad place. After that meeting, I found out he'd been talking to Mom about your house for over a year. He came up with the memorandum. He introduced her to his cousin. He kept telling me everything was legal and that you were just being difficult. Her voice cracked. I should have called you. I should have asked if any of it was true. Instead, I believed them. I'm sorry. I looked out across the lake before answering. The water was perfectly still. Finally, I said, I appreciate you telling me. She replied, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I said, I know. It wasn't some emotional reunion. It was simply two adults admitting the truth. Honestly, that felt more real than anything we'd shared in years. As for Travis, things fell apart quickly. After the attorney meeting, Mallory confronted him. From everything I later learned, Travis had been the one driving the entire plan. He convinced my mom she had a legitimate claim to my lake house. Travis had coached my mom through the insurance call. He arranged for his cousin to draft the fake document. And in the end, it was never really about Kelsey or keeping the house in the family. Travis had been struggling financially for the past 2 years. He saw my lake house as an asset he could eventually use. If my mom could establish even a partial legal claim, the property could later be leveraged, borrowed against, or forced into a sale. That had been his long-term plan all along. Mallory filed for separation in April. Their divorce was finalized by the fall. I didn't celebrate it. Divorce is hard, especially when children are involved. But I also couldn't pretend Travis hadn't brought it on himself. His cousin, the paralegal, quietly left her law firm not long afterward. Diane told me she probably wouldn't face formal discipline since the document was never filed, but her professional reputation had taken a serious hit. Sometimes that's punishment enough. As for my mom and me, things are different now. Not perfect. Just honest. About 4 months after everything settled, I invited her to the lake house. Just her. We sat on the deck for a long time without saying much. Finally, she looked at me and said, I don't know when I started believing I was owed things. I didn't have an answer. I don't think she expected one. Then she told me she'd started seeing a therapist. Apparently, Uncle Glenn had been encouraging her to do that for years. I told her I was glad, and I meant it. We're still not especially close. We don't talk every week. She doesn't come to the lake house very often. But when we do see each other, it feels different. There's less guilt, less manipulation, less pretending. Whether that lasts is up to her. All I can do is leave the door open, Mallory and I actually talk more now than we did before all of this. Strange as that sounds, exposing the worst parts of our family made room for something more honest. She's raising Kelsey and her younger son mostly on her own now. Travis gets the kids every other weekend. A while ago, Mallory told me Kelsey asked about the lake house, not about inheriting it. She just wanted to know if she could come swimming this summer. I smiled and said, "Of course she can." Uncle Glenn comes by almost every weekend now. He brings his fishing gear, terrible jokes, and whatever cheap beer happened to be on sale. He'll spend hours sitting on the dock without catching a single fish, and somehow still have the best day of anyone there. Brianna and I are doing great. She moved into the lake house that May, and for the first time, it actually feels like a home instead of something I constantly have to defend. She hung curtains in the kitchen, planted herbs by the back door, and even put up a little sign with our last name on the deck. I joked that after everything that happened, my last name barely felt like Holloway anymore. She smiled and said, "It still is. You're just the good Holloway." As I'm writing this, I'm sitting on that same deck. The sunset has turned the whole lake orange. Brianna is inside making dinner. Glenn's truck is parked in the driveway because he forgot his cooler here yesterday. Knowing him, he's probably already inside talking Brianna's ear off. This isn't the ending I imagined. It's messier than that. Some parts still hurt when I think about them. My mom pretending to be my spouse. My sister announcing that my house belonged to her daughter. Travis sitting there at Christmas, smiling because he thought his plan was working. But I've realized something. The lake house was never the real prize. It was just the excuse. What they were really trying to take from me was my right to say no. The moment I finally said it, calmly, clearly, and with proof, the whole plan fell apart. Not because I was smarter than they were, simply because the truth is hard to fight when it's backed up by evidence. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's simple. Document everything. Keep your plans to yourself until you're ready, and when it's time to act, do it once and do it properly. Never apologize for protecting what you've earned. The lake house has always been mine. Now everyone finally knows it.